So, our guest today is our own superintendent of Surrey Schools, Mark Pearmain. Mark has been an educator for 30 years across 3 school districts with multiple roles, including teacher, school leader, and superintendent, first in North Vancouver, and for the last 3.5 years in BC's largest school district of Surrey Schools. Beyond educational leadership, Mark is also a husband, a dad, a skier, and he is our inaugural guest of season 2 of Leading Voices in Education. We look forward to talking today about leadership and the launch of the 25-26 school year. Mark, thank you for being on our podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me, first off. And I'm feeling a little bit old when you said 30 years. So I'm gonna just conveniently forget that and think that I'm still midstream. How about that?
Sounds good.
Well, it's perfect, except for our first question is going to ask you about those 30 years, so we might be hanging on to it for a second. So we're hoping you can tell us a little bit about your journey in education and the different roles that you had leading up to your time as superintendent in Surrey.
I think what I'll do is I'll go back to my time in university. So I went to UVic. I'm an alumni of the University of Victoria. And between my 4th and 5th year, I took a gap year and traveled. And I vividly remember spending time in Frankfurt along the river, really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And was kind of playing back and forth with, do I want to continue with education or do I want to do something else? And it just took me back to my high school experience, which was amazing. I had amazing teachers, amazing principals and vice principals. I finished my gap year. I went back to school. I finished my degree and then went straight into teaching. I'm originally from North Vancouver, but lived in Vancouver when I graduated university and got a 4-month temporary contract as a special education teacher at Kitsilano Secondary School. And vividly remember walking into that school with excitement, apprehension, kind of a wonder of like, really, is this what I want to do? And can I do this? And I entered with about 15 to 16 new teachers at all the same point in time. Suddenly we had a cohort. We were all new to the school. We were all, relatively speaking, kind of the same demographic. And landed with an amazing principal. His name, Dwayne Woodside. We called him Woody, but he was just someone that just opened his arms to us as new staff. He made us feel welcome and empowered and encouraged. And it just launched me on a trajectory that I never thought I would be here, but here I am. So from Kitsilano, I taught there for 7 years now that I think about it. It was 3.5 when I started my master's and just had an amazing experience. So started in special education and then I taught history 12 AP and social studies 8. So I got them coming in and on the way out and just followed the passions of coaching and all those good things. And then started to kind of just build into that leadership path, I suppose, and followed that. And here I am.
And I know you said to us yesterday in a different meeting that during your first month, the librarian yelled at you to get back to class because you were in the hallway.
Yep. And you know what? From that point on, for the first 4 years, I wore a tie every single day.
Awesome.
And it was very much one of those moments in time, actually, when I think about it, is just to recognize, even in my current role, you don't know people's stories just from a visual image, right? So you really have to take that moment and stop and then hopefully go and find out a little bit more about them as human beings to find out what their story is before you make that assumption.
Mark, this September, many principals and vice principals are stepping into new school communities. What guidance would you offer to those beginning their journey in building trust within their school communities? And there's a 2-part to this. What do you believe are the top 3 qualities to cultivate in principals and vice principals today?
Well, first off, it takes me back to my first role as a vice principal at Point Grey Secondary School. And I remember kind of walking in thinking, my gosh, they totally made a mistake in terms of hiring me. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And the confidence level was low, just thinking, seriously, you're giving me the keys to this place? Like, I know I have like a principal who's going to help me, but this is, what are you doing type thing. But I also just remember that kind of sense of adventure. And so I think what I would say to our brand new vice principals and principals is, first off, you're there for a reason. You may not know it or you may not see it in yourself, but other people see in you the leadership qualities that we're looking for and have confidence in your abilities, even the ones that you don't know yet. I would also say, and don't change who you are. just because you have a new title or a new role or even a new school, don't be someone who you aren't. Be yourself, follow your core values, follow your instincts, because that's actually what's gotten you to the place where you are today. I think as well as you get longer in the tooth in leadership, the being your authentic self becomes easier because
Mhm.
you've done it, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is that if you can get your head wrapped around of just being authentic, you asked the question, how do you get staff to follow you and to work with you? It's
Mhm.
about being authentic. It's about being real. It's about not thinking that you have the answer to every question immediately, at your fingertips. It's like, actually, I don't know. I don't know, and I'm going to go find out, and then we're going to work through this together. But I think for me, in terms of my own journey, I was quite young as a secondary school principal. I was in my early 30s. And at that time, there wasn't as much kind of quick movement through the ranks for principals and vice principals. And, I'm working with and leading folks who have been around in the system for 25 plus years, 30 years. And here's this 32-year-old who's in his seventh year in education, now being a vice principal. And that's the space where it was like, okay, I need to listen, to learn, to ask questions, to be okay with the fact that if someone asks me a question, I don't know the answer and I'll come back to them. And ultimately, in doing so, I think from my perspective, I was able to build relationships really quickly with folks. So when I think of our current new vice principals and principals going in, they're into a new school. In many cases, they may not have that social capital of what they did in their past school where they were a long serving teacher or maybe a teacher lead. No one really knows them. They know a little bit of their reputation. And so here's your opportunity to be your true, authentic self, of being humble, of being inquisitive, of being a support, but also one who will take a stand when you need to. And I think if you follow that, people will recognize, okay, what Mark says is what Mark says. So I may not agree with it, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
at least I know that he's listening to me, he's heard me, he's understood my perspective. And while I may not agree, I will still follow in terms of where we need to go.
That's very good advice. And this year I'm starting at a new site. And I said to my vice principal, because we're both new, and I said, this just feels really odd
Yep.
because I'm walking into a culture that I still have to learn about. And so I said, the changes we make in the beginning, we can't make too many changes because they're not based on anything if we do make those changes. Our decisions at this point will be based on our last sites, but we don't know enough about this site and why they do things the way that they do. So I said, we just have to ask a lot of questions. It's a very uncomfortable feeling when you go from a place where you know everything, well, you think you know everything, and you've helped form that culture, to now going to a new site. And just as you said, you don't have that same social capital,
Mhm.
and just to go in as a learner and
Yeah.
learn and make decisions based on information you have.
There's a phrase, you go slow to move fast,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
in some cases, you can do real damage if you go too fast.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There is a tension or a balance, Sandeep, of you don't want to have paralysis by analysis. Like, you can't continually just analyze. At some point in time, you'll have to make the call or a direction. But that space of really, slowing down, generally speaking, in education, things are not life threatening. So you have time. It may not feel like you have time, but you actually have time to slow things down, to have that sober second thought, ideally to phone a friend,
Mm-hmm.
phone a trusted colleague where you can bounce ideas off, where you can have your perspective either validated or actually questioned,
Yeah.
right? And a trick that I've learned, because there's frustrations that happen for all of us all the time. Doesn't matter if you're a classroom teacher or an EA, an office staff member, a custodian, whatever our life circumstance, it just hits you at that moment. And the natural inclination is to either write back, and it's usually not a good thing. I was taught very early in my career, which is you write that email as a draft, you park it, you go back to it the next day, probably delete it, and then you actually respond.
Mark, I won't even put it in drafts because I'm so afraid by accident I'll hit send. I put it in a Word document.
There you go. So we have the same method, right? It's just a matter of how you do it.
Now, you referenced your core values already, which leads into our next question. And our next question is a little bit about change. And I was thinking, man, if you knew when you signed up to be superintendent in Surrey, all the change that was coming your way. You've been leading BC's largest district through pretty complex times, including recovery from a pandemic, staffing shortages, budget constraints, and more, and of course, our growing enrollment. What core values have guided your leadership? And how have they influenced the way that you make decisions, foster relationships, and navigate challenges?
Yeah, when you lay it out like that, it is a little bit mind-boggling. I guess I'll go back to a couple of things. First off, I've had experience in 2 other districts, right? So you do get experience of just seeing how things are done in different contexts, and ultimately that does kind of shape how you come to a situation like we're in or have been in terms of kind of coming out of a pandemic and budget constraints and others. So the core values of this is one, change is hard. It's hard for people, okay, and it's hard for an individual, and it's hard for an organization and a system. And so the first thing is just to acknowledge that COVID was difficult. Coming back from COVID was difficult, and so we get into new routines, and you need to sometimes just be able to acknowledge this. And I recognize that where we're going and what's happening is going to be difficult, and different for each individual. It's also a recognition that for some, there'll be a time of grieving because it's either practice or things that they have known and done for a very long time. And maybe not by their choice, they're having to shift. So again, it's acknowledging that. It's also, though, a space of you want to point in the direction of where you're going. So we're not just changing for the sake of changing. It's actually we're changing because of these reasons, and this is where we're going. And in the case of a superintendent, there's the tension of the day to day, and I look 5 to 10 years out, and that is a struggle sometimes, because the day to day obviously is the 13,000 staff and the 84,000 kids and the 170,000 mums, dad, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles,
Yeah.
their journey at the same point. And so part of it is to ensure that you're trying to lay out where we're going and the why, and recognizing that your audiences are going to be different. So, you ask for the core value as much as you can. It's transparency of where you're going. So if you think of it from the perspective of the current role that I have, my role right now is to set a vision of where we're going and ensure that the foundation of the Surrey School District is strong and prepared to change as the education system changes, which it is. That is a reality. So that doesn't mean that we stop focusing on literacy and numeracy and those core elements. Like, we know that that is the basis for our kids to be successful. And we need to start to think about, okay, what's society like today? There's many, many people who are hybrid work environments. Look at us today. We're having a conversation that's being recorded online in different places. And those are skills today that our students, they need to have, right? This isn't an option saying, well, maybe they need to have them. It's like, no, they actually need to have them. Any student that goes into post-secondary, yes, their classes are in person and they will be taking online courses. It's not an option. That's what's happening. So when I think of, for example, hybrid learning is the opportunity and the experience for kids to gain those skills. But that's a huge change of practice for our principals, for some of our staff, for our parents, even for our kids, to get their minds wrapped around the why. And so the why is actually to build out, this is why we're doing it. This is your option. This is how you can gain these skills, because it's really our responsibility to prepare you for the society that you're entering in today. If we take it to another level, we're spending a lot of time, for example, on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, you can have your opinion on it. Your opinion could be that it's the best thing since the creation of the internet, or it's the worst thing since the creation of the internet. Either way, it's here, and our kids are in that world and they're living in it. And so again, this is a space for, as a district, and trying to look forward 5, 10 years. Now we need to be acting. And so the tension for folks is that as we're bringing these things in, it's change. right? It's also change that these are by choice. Like we're
Mhm.
choosing to do these. There's also change that is being brought in, maybe not by choice, with financial constraints, which
Yeah.
forces us to take a look at how we've been doing things, what we've been doing, and can we continue to do them, or do we need to focus those resources elsewhere? And so that's a tension that our staff and our community have been living in for certainly the last 3 years. It really started earlier because COVID brought in some of that change of practice. You lived it. You were part of this
Yep.
school district. So if you think of it, our district has been going through a process of change, a process of innovation for the past 5 years, and is continuing as we move forward to this new place. And that's a space that is, I think, super interesting, super challenging. I think of Sandeep, you're going into a brand new school, you have a brand new vice principal, there's expectations that you have for yourself. There's also expectations that the district has, and we want you to be focusing on bringing forward some of these new ideas from the district. There's
Yeah.
lots going on there,
Not
right?
an easy task.
It's not an easy task. And to be honest, it can be tiring, but it's also super invigorating because in the end, I think of the kindergarten student that is entering your school today. They are graduating in 2038. So what will their society look like in 2038? And what are we doing as much as we can to set them up for success in a future that we can't even really picture yet? And to me, that's super exciting.
Yeah. And I think like when you are talking about AI and hybrid learning, and we look at our Ks that are entering, there's that fear that a lot of parents have with our littles, right? Like our kids who are in primary, that people go too far or educators go too far into that tech side, right?
Mhm.
So it's all about that balance. And I think sometimes that's where the miscommunication can be, or people interpret the communication incorrectly in terms of, are they teaching AI to my child who's only 5
Yep.
or 6 or 7? And I don't want them on screens yet. I want them outside and playing, and they need to still communicate and make eye contact. So what is your answer to those parents? Like, because that is a valid question that I know many principals, I had so many questions about tech time
Yep.
at my welcome to K.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So first off, students need to be able to read and write mathematics. Like that is your foundation. We also know that in today's society, students and adults, to be successful, need to be able to collaborate. They need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to understand each other, respect each other's differences, celebrate differences,
Mhm.
and have tolerance. None of that is taught through AI.
Thank you.
All of that is actually taught through human interaction,
Yeah.
right? So that's fundamental number one. So the response would be, when you look at the skills that people are going to need and the competencies that people are going to need, this is actually what this is about: collaboration, communication, respect, understanding different worldviews. All of that actually comes from human interaction, which is still going to be a primary focus of our schooling. The other thing I would gently ask our parents of kiddies coming in is, for most, their children are already on screens in some form or manner. It may be an iPad, it may be their phone, their parents' phone. And without them maybe even recognizing it, they're already utilizing AI. So now this is about not indoctrinating them into artificial intelligence, far from it. The process that we want to start to follow in the school district is to help students understand, if you're going to use it, which you already are, how you use it, what's the benefit of using it, how do you use it ethically, morally, how are you using it, i.e., are you using it to just write an essay for you, or are you using it as a prompt to help you in your learning, and how can it enhance your learning, not replace your learning?
That's a very important
It is.
statement.
It's really
Yeah,
important.
because that's where the confusion
Yep.
is with, I think, some educators, very few, and with learners. Like, I don't need to know how to do this essay because I have ChatGPT.
Yep. Which, like anything, I would suggest will be probably the initial way that a student will enter in, right? And then
Yep.
they'll start to realize, wait a minute, there's a lot more power to this. One of the things I'm really proud of and would encourage all of our parents and our staff is go to the Surrey One website, because there is a lot of explanation and resources for parents and staff and students when it comes to artificial intelligence. I think in many cases, it's really important for our parents to go there. There's actually video series there for them to understand a little bit more about AI, why we're actually doing what we're doing and how it's all around us at this point in time.
Mhm.
Not actually to be a scare tactic, but actually just to allow them to themselves get educated in terms of what's actually happening. I think the last thing I'll say with this, back to the kindergarten parent coming in, is it's everything in moderation. If we think of a kindergarten classroom, we're not teaching them calculus. We're teaching them how to interact with each other. They're beginning the basics of literacy. They're learning how to sort. They're learning how to interact in groups. They're learning how to be little human beings.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that, ultimately. That's the beautiful thing of a kindergarten classroom.
Yeah.
And you're so right that they do bring those strengths and they already come with so many skills. And sometimes they know how to do things on devices that adults might not know how to do. I know my last year as a principal, I had this little guy in kindergarten named Dominic, and his parents came in and were a bit frustrated with and they were telling me they were at home and they just wanted a few minutes of downtime. So they gave him an iPad and they thought he was playing a game. And a few minutes later, the doorbell went because he had ordered a pizza that showed up. I don't know that my mom knows how to order a pizza online, but
Yeah.
Dominic sure did.
Yep.
So they're figuring out the world in a new way.
So, Mark, as you lead during this time of complexity, what keeps you grounded and what practices or mindsets help you maintain emotional well-being and resilience in your role as superintendent? Because I can only imagine how much you have on your plate. I mean, you just listed off what VPs and principals have on theirs. So it would be interesting to hear how you handle it all.
Well, one of the lessons that I've learned is that you can't do it all yourself. And so I will say this to the principals and vice principals. It's really important to empower your team, and it's really important to empower your teachers that you work with. And so when I think of the team here, from district principals to directors of instruction to assistant superintendents or deputy superintendent, I trust them implicitly. They are incredibly smart people who do amazing work and have incredible grounding in terms of what we're trying to accomplish together collectively. I'm also surrounded by people that actually are focused on the us, not on the them. And that allows us to park, I would suggest, any ego or any competitiveness. It's not to say we're not competitive. The reality is that I think just to be in maybe senior roles, there is a competitiveness, but it's a recognition that we're actually stronger together. Then my role really is to give them the support that they need to flourish and to be amazing. So in a roundabout way, Sandeep, the way that I stay grounded is by investing time and energy and empowerment into the people that I work with. I will put on the superintendent hat when I need to put the superintendent hat on.
Mm-hmm.
But if Perry Smith, for example, who's leading hybrid learning, if we need to do a presentation in front of the board on hybrid learning, it's going to be Perry. He's the expert. He's the one that's been pushing it forward. He's the one that's doing the implementation. And I can help him and I can help maybe guide the board if need be, but he's really the one that's going to do that. So that actually, in a reverse way, takes an immense amount of pressure off of me because instead of actually having to do all of those projects, I'm just actually supporting individual folks who are the leads. And then they can come back to me and say, this is what I need. And then I can find the resources or the time or the experts or the contacts that they need to continue to push that forward. That's from the professional side. And so I would encourage, again, any principal, anybody actually in any leadership role, including a non-formalized leadership role, work with others and empower others, because ultimately that team mentality is it's going to get you farther, and it's also actually going to make the work a lot easier. When it comes to the personal side, there is balance. I drive. I have about a 28-minute commute, and so I listen to podcasts. Shout out to this one. And others where I can learn and also sometimes just clear my mind. So an audible book, for example, it could be music, but it's actually that time to ground and to settle down. Regular exercise as much as you possibly can. That is sometimes difficult, but it is something that just to be outside in the natural surroundings is super grounding for me. And Christy, in the opening, you talked about, I love to ski. So each one of us has that passion, right? For me, it's skiing. For others, it could be quilting. For others, it could be reading a book, whatever it is that really does ground. And so for me, being on a mountain and seeing how small I am in relative terms to the surroundings that I live in, the fresh air, the challenge of the slope, it actually just puts things back into context for me. That kind of personal piece for me of being on the mountains and being out and about, it gives me that place of actually reminding me, listen, you're a small cog in a very big machine. You happen to be in a role that maybe has more profile, but it doesn't mean that the work that you're doing is any better than the work that somebody else is doing. It's just actually part of the system that we all are part of.
You had said something earlier, have someone that you can call. And, right now you just said it's important to not have basically that ego
Yep.
and know that you're a small part or a part of a system. I trust that you probably have some critical friends that put you in your place at times. I know I do. So I know it's very important for me to have a friend that I can call that can basically say, like, shut up. That is not what you should be doing. Who are those people for you, if you don't mind
No,
answering?
yeah, that's a great question. So I've just stopped working with her last year, but Sheila Rooney, who was a former superintendent in Burnaby,
Mhm.
I think she was probably one of the first female leaders or women leaders in the metro area in a fairly male dominated role for quite a while. She started mentoring me when I became a director of instruction in Vancouver. And we carried on all the way through my superintendency in North Vancouver and then the first year and a half of my time here in Surrey. And, she was and is annoyingly good at asking really frustrating questions.
Yeah.
Right. And I just really respect her for that because she would always get to the meat of it and was never trying to give a solution. It was really just to be providing some thought provoking suggestions for me to contemplate and just really valued her expertise and her wisdom and her insight. And I think, we had worked so long together that she knew, right?
Mhm.
She knew the questions to ask. And also sometimes, it wasn't even a question. It was just a word of encouragement, which was, needed at the time. I now have a coach that I work with, not so much for the day to day kind of work, but really more about large term strategy thinking, and sometimes getting out of my own head. Super valuable. Again, not something that I had actually really thought that I either wanted or needed, but
Mhm.
I did a performance review from the board last year, which is again a great experience. I think everybody thinks that you're being evaluated, it's a negative. It's like no, it's you get to learn about yourself and you get to learn about your positives that you're doing in areas of growth. That was a really successful experience for me. And I just really wanted to continue to kind of do that development. So I reached out and been working with him now for about a year. And I have those trusted group of people, right?
Mhm.
So I would break them into two groups. One would be the professional folks. So I'm very tight with some superintendents, Chris Kennedy in West Vancouver, Dave Eberwine. Those are folks that if I need to, I can call. Teresa Downs in Maple Ridge. They're incredibly seasoned professionals who really have a very strong kind of moral compass
Mhm.
and says it straight if need be. So that's the professional side, and then in the personal side, you have your peeps. It could be just going for a walk where it's venting. It could be going out and just having a pint or whatever. That group I can go to. Part of the challenge, like you in your roles, is that sometimes I have to speak in
Yeah.
circles. I can't actually share exactly what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So it's less about the issue and more about the personal struggle that I'm going through at the time or the challenge that I'm trying to work through. So they can help me on that. And then in my case, my primary support is my amazing wife. She, like all of us, I think we are successful because of the people who walk alongside us. She's an amazing resource that just allows me that space to work through problems sometimes on time when I should be spending with her. But also recognizes that there's time and space just in terms of the role that I do that has to eat into a little bit more time at home.
Thank you.
Now we have one final question for you. And we heard you say yesterday when you were talking to our new principals and vice principals that our work is very seasonal. Every September is a new September and a new start and a new year. So As you look ahead to 2025-26, this school year, what are your hopes for this year ahead?
Well, first off, like probably most teachers and most IESWs and principals and vice principals, the butterflies are starting. So, context for people watching this, today is the day that we'll get all of our management staff together to kind of set the tone. So the butterflies are there. They don't change. It might come at a different time. So when I think of this year, I'll take it granular first. I'm thinking of the brand new kindergarten student, Sandeep, that's coming into your school. And they may be the first child of a set of parents. And so it's their first experience in school. My hope is that their experience coming into schools, which is going to be filled with lots of angst and wonder and nervousness because it's their child, that they settle in and have an amazing year of learning. And that amazing year of learning for both the parents and the child and the teacher will have ups and downs. It's never smooth, right? But it'll have those ups and downs. But that they'll have a successful year by the time that June 30th rolls around. That child has integrated into a system that they will be part of for the next 12 years, that they have made friends, that they've made a connection with a trusted adult in the building, that they've experienced wonder, that they've seen things and learned things that they never knew about, and that they will go home to their mom or dad or mums and mums or dads or aunties or uncles or grandparents or whomever and will share their experience of wonder. I also then take it to a system and I think of our member staff. And I think of, again, the excitement of us coming back. Like we all are on a cycle. It doesn't matter if you're in business operations or schools. Like the reality is there's an excitement in September. And my hope is that for each individual person, they're finding that personal fulfillment, whatever that looks like, knowing that they're serving their community and each one of us in our own way. Some with very formalized positions, others not in a formalized position. We're all servant leaders.
Yeah.
We've chosen to serve, right? And so my hope for them is that they have amazing experiences in the work that they do, serving others, that they ground themselves in the fact that while many times the work that they do is not seen by many, it's super valued because it's actually serving a community of people that we either live with or live in the community or are part of this community. And I would say that as we are going into unsettled times, right? Geopolitically, it's unsettled. I think it's fair to say that provincially, we've got some challenges from a budgetary perspective, which one can only assume is going to have trickle-down effects into other organizations and things that are reliant upon government funding. Also the bargaining process, just to acknowledge and remember that in times of stress and in times of choppy waters, what we can do for each other is we can just treat each other with grace and kindness and thoughtfulness. And if we remember those basic skills that we learned in kindergarten, then we will get through these times. We will get through them because we always get through them, but we'll get through them actually stronger and more connected and more united, because there'll be times when Christy's having a really tough time. And if I'm treating everybody with kindness and grace, I can come alongside and maybe I can unload the burden a little bit for her, and vice versa for me. So that's my hope for us as a district. It's actually not really a hope. I think that's my expectation, because I truly believe that that's what's going to happen this year. And I look forward to the school year. I look forward to getting into schools and seeing kids and seeing staff and hearing about the amazing things and trying to explain why we're doing what we're doing and continuing to set us up for an amazing future.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been great talking to you and learning so much, and really good advice for our educators, people in admin, and for parents. So thank you for coming on to our show.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me.